Sam Curran bowls really, really full. His lengths are more like a club bowler, really, than anything you normally associate with Test match cricket. Obviously, part of this is that his main skill is swinging the ball, and it's harder to get the ball to swing consistently from back of a length. He's also a little bit shorter, and he's got that kind of an action, but he does bowl really full. And in fact, when he does bowl back of a length, it's just not as good. It just doesn't look as penetrating or as dangerous in any way. And the ball doesn't always swing, which makes him kind of one-dimensional in that way. And yet, he still has a career, and it's because there's lots of different factors to Sam Curran, the cricketer. He can bat, and he can field. He's clearly a very clever cricketer. But in some ways, there is a kind of limit on his natural skills, even if he has a wider array of natural skills than a normal player. The funny thing about Sam Curran is that not that long ago, his skills would have been completely in vogue. England have been desperate for a left armer since Ryan Sidebottom and Alan Mullally, I suppose. The rest of cricket seems to find them quite regularly, and England does not. Curran is important in that. And on top of that, he's not just bowling junk left arm pace. He has skill, he can swing it, he knows what he's doing. And while he's not quick, faster than a medium pacer. I mean, straight away, a lot of this makes him a very handy cricketer. But cricket isn't quite played the same way now, and swing is no longer king. Left arm is still handy, but maybe not as popular as it was not that long ago. Right now, the main skills you want in your bowlers are quicker than 85 miles an hour, the ability to move the ball both ways for a long period of time, preferably off the pitch, incredible accuracy, a hard to hit off length, and a wobble seam. And I think Sam Curran is trying to learn the wobble seam, but some of those other things just won't ever work for him. Even though Sam Curran has played most of his career in the global pace bowling pandemic, his actual bowling average is just fine. This would be slightly above average for a normal period, but is remarkably above average for right now. But he does bring extra things because of that left arm, or specifically because of his feet. When Moeen Ali plays, Sam Curran gives England the opportunity to give Moeen Ali footmarks to bowl into. But the problem is, again, that Sam Curran is not a heavy stepper. He doesn't really dig the pitch up, he just sort of gently displaces some of the top part of it. But left arm bowlers are very important. Ravi Jadeja has been averaging 17 against left arm pace over the last 3 or 4 years while he's been batting really good. And there are plenty of players like him when it comes to top order players around the world that just can't really handle left arm pace. And for that alone, you might want someone like Sam Curran around. And again, that makes him really handy. And we haven't even got to his batting yet. His batting is patchy. At his current level, it's hard to see him ever holding down the number 7 position. He clearly doesn't dominate all kinds of bowling, and he has big weaknesses in his batting, but that's what you would expect from someone who bats lower middle order, or in his case, upper tail. But he can see the ball very well, he's very confident, he hits it quite hard, he's going to play a lot of fun innings, and he will change matches because, he hits the ball hard and scores quickly. But I don't think he's a top 7 batter as he currently stands. Especially for a team where only one of the top 7 averages 40 plus. Perhaps in like New Zealand's order where you could roll the dice with him a little bit more. But England's top 6 is, shaky at best. Remember, Jos Buttler came back into this team as a specialist batting number 7. That's not a good sign. So as an all-rounder, this gets tricky. And I want to talk about all-rounders because I do believe, and I've probably said this before, that all-rounders get treated very unfairly in their careers. Their records are usually deflated in one or both of the metrics that we have a look at them, and we still don't have a great way of actually judging all-rounders compared to specialist batters or specialist bowlers. So they usually fall into one of 2 very extreme categories. Great or shit. I, of course, have called this the Botham-Pringle continuum, where you can either be Botham or you can be Pringle, and there's pretty much nothing in between those 2 guys. You're either a bum or a legend who will be discussed for decades to come and become a trade envoy to Australia. And all-rounders are magical and can transform your team, or they can, sink it. And baseball is finally getting this after, almost 100 years of ignoring all-rounders, or as they call them, two-way players. One kind of turned up to Major League Baseball by accident. And baseball has completely lost its shit with Shohei Ohtani. But of course they have. All-rounders are, or two-way players are, completely awesome. We know that. We're cricket fans. Ohtani is the biggest story in US sports at the moment, despite being Japanese and not even being able to speak English publicly. And that's because he's in the top 10 sluggers and top 10 pitchers at the same time, which is, a remarkable thing. It's not even something that happens very often in cricket. But he's only done it for a short period of time, so things may regress a little bit. But we know what the impact of this is if Ohtani can carry this off, because we had this in cricket. Imran Khan did it for a decade. And it is weird because for the first almost 10 years of his career, Imran Khan wasn't actually that much better than Sam Curran. He was better, obviously, but he wasn't that much better. And then in the second part of his career, he transformed into the most dominant cricketer we have had since Don Bradman. He was better than peak sobers for just a stupidly long time. For a 10-year period from 1982 to 1992 in Test match cricket, Imran Khan averaged over 50 with the bat and under 20 with the ball. It's so stupid. How is that possible? He had the best bowling average in that period, despite the fact that Richard Hadley and Malcolm Marshall were bowling at that time, and they are arguably the greatest bowlers of all time. That's nuts. But then he had the 5th best batting average, comfortably over 50, and behind names like Meandad and Border. This means that statistically, for a decade, he was worth 2 great players in your team. Sobers and Callis, both absolute greats as batting, were not greats as bowlers. They represented one great and one either average or just below average player. Only Bradman was ever worth 2 greats. Now, he did it for a whole career before and after a war. But Imran did it for a decade. And he did it for a decade when cricket was a lot more global than when Bradman played it. And in a team that was still developing. Pakistan didn't even really get good until, well, Imran got good, which may not be a coincidence. And his batting was a little bit more on paper than actually dominating. But he was still an outstanding number 6 or 7. Any team would want him to be batting there for them. And mostly he just, didn't go out. In 65 innings, only 15 times did he go out for a single figure score. He just kept getting in. He only made 500s, but he made so many 50s and so many 30s and 40s. He just made a lot of small runs, medium runs. But to average 50 for a decade, you take that from your number 6. You take that from your number 3. You take that from anyone, even if it was with only a few hundreds. If Shohei Ohtani would be able to do anything similar to what Imran Khan has done, then he quite clearly should become Japan's Prime Minister. What Imran Khan did and what Ohtani is already starting to do is pretty much impossible. You shouldn't be able to be a great batter and a great bowler, or a great pitcher and a great slugger, because they're different body types and it's different. It's completely different. And that's why any all-rounder who makes the international stage is already incredibly gifted. It's just not the way we look at them. Especially if you're comparing a player who's handy in both disciplines to a player who was great in both. But there are handy all-rounders out there whose averages may not look spectacular, but they allow their team to not lose that much at batting at number 6 or number 7 and give them extra bowling, whether it be extended rests or whether it actually be taking wickets. And at the moment, that's Curran's kind of best case scenario. He's never going to be a frontline bowler. For Surrey, he takes less than 3 wickets a game. And that's good, but it's not frontline. Compare him to Ollie Robertson, and it's clear that he's just not a specialist bowler. And England use him that way too. He's quite clearly a 5th option. Curran bowls around 20 overs a test, and that's similar to Stokes and Callis. But look at Jimmy Anderson. That's what a frontline bowler bowls. And as a batter, England have used him as a number 7 4 times. He's batted far more at number 9. He's usually a number 8. And that's where his record has been far better as well. For Surrey, Curran has repeatedly asked to bat higher, but it hasn't quite worked out through team makeup and the way that they've gone about it. Meaning for Surrey, he bats at 7. He averages 27 there. If you average 27 in first-class cricket batting at 7, you can really hope to average anything near 30 if you're playing in Test cricket. And when he has batted at 8 for Surrey, he's just done a lot better. What all this means right now is that Sam Curran is a 5th bowler and an 8th batter in an England Test lineup. And as far as all-rounders go, that's on the lower end of usefulness. I think for England, this only really works if Ben Stokes and Moeen Ali are playing, and certainly you need one of them in the lineup to fit Curran in. That means that England could go into a test with 6 bowling options, 3 absolute specialists, and Stokes, Moeen, and Curran, and they would bat to 8. So they would have more bowling options and a deeper batting lineup. That's kind of the dream of Sam Curran at the moment. It also works out quite well because Stokes can offer the extra pace and Curran can help Moeen Ali's off-spin. But when only one of them plays, and even more particularly when neither of them play, you can't use Curran as your 4th bowling option, as he's just not a strong enough wicket taker. And he really can't bat at 6 or 7 because he's just not that good a bat. It sounds weird to call him limited because he's a legitimate 3-tool player. He can bat, bowl, and field. It's just that the fit is quite often a bit awkward and you have to gerrymander it a little bit. And if you've been waiting the whole time for me to talk about Chennai because you're that kind of person, I am going to talk about what he's done for the Super Kings because I think it is quite interesting. He has been brilliant in the IPL, bowling up front, swinging the ball, and then batting at number 7 with a huge strike rate. He's really, really well suited to the role he plays at Chennai. The thing about Chennai is they also have a lot of all-rounders, which means that they can overcome some of his shortcomings. Curran is a really, really unique player and a very talented player, but because of the kind of player he is, he only fits into certain lineups. But the lineups he does fit into, he usually improves. And he's still very young. He's only 23 and he looks, 8. That isn't very old for an all-rounder. Most all-rounders develop later on in their career because if you're a specialist batter, you've spent all of your life in the nets. And if you're a specialist bowler, you spend a lot of time bowling. If you're an all-rounder, you have to share that time, which means quite often they develop later. So what Sam Curran is at 23 may not be the player he is at 27 or 28. A bit like what happened with Imran Khan. I mean, I'm not expecting him to become like Imran Khan. I'm just saying he could continue to develop and actually become a much better player in the second half of his career. There are things that Curran could do to help himself. He could probably leave Surrey and go to another team that's willing to bat him at 4 or 5. He may not find that team, but it's worth asking around. And it's quite clear he's already developing his bowling, so when the ball doesn't swing, he can still be dangerous. There's no reason why he can't get more and more experience and become a different kind of bowler going forward. I mean, he's obviously never going to have an Imran-like transformation or an Ohtani-like impact. But what Curran is currently doing is really interesting. He's a full bowling left arm swing bowler who likes to bowl earlier in the innings, whose footmarks help Mo and Ali, who can smash the ball when he bats, but probably can't bat any higher than 8, and can also field. I mean, Sam Curran is a lot of things, and mostly those things are quite handy.